Do you know what's even more frightening than the White Walkers? The idea that someone somewhere is watching this show for the first time? Oh, hey, welcome to Watchers. I'm here. Come for the game and stay for the terrible jokes. Today we're talking about the top 5 scariest moments from Game of Thrones. As always, though, a little disclaimer before we begin. This is all in good fun. Feel free to disagree with my picks in the comments. And also, there are major spoilers ahead for the entire series. So if you haven't finished yet, turn back now. Still here. Good. Then let's do this. As much as we love or hate certain aspects of Game of Thrones, we can all agree that its soundtrack is about as iconic as it gets. The main theme is instantly recognizable and just hits different. Composer Rumen Djawadi masterfully blends orchestral scores with electronic beats and rock instrumentation to evoke everything from foreboding dread to hopeful wonder, and that's part of why he's so great at what he does. Now, it's no secret that Ramit's original work on the show was actually inspired by another legend. In the world of film scoring, there is perhaps no bigger name than Hans Zimmer. You've heard his work whether you realize it or not. The Lion King, Interstellar, Inception, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dark Knight, Daenerys, The Mother of Dragons. Oh yeah, that's right. God. The beginning of Ramit's career can be traced back to his days assisting Zimmer on that very same Pirates soundtrack. At the time, Zimmer was struggling to find the right tempo for the famous sword fight between Jack Sparrow and Will Turner. Now, the fight scene itself is almost entirely improvised, which is already problematic for a composer trying to establish a beat. But after days of deliberation, Zimmer was still stuck, and the frustration was starting to build. Then, as if out of nowhere, a young assistant named Rumen Djawadi stepped forward and asked for a chance to try. And well, the rest is history. Not only did Rami's edit end up being used, but it was just the beginning of a huge career that would go on to include scores for Iron Man, Westworld, Pacific Rim, and of course, one of the biggest pieces of pop culture of the last decade, Game of Thrones. But how did someone whose real claim to fame was writing music for a video game end up scoring the biggest TV show on the planet? Well, as it turns out, this story starts long before George R.R. Martin ever penned a word of A Song of Ice and Fire. Ramit's love for film music began early, writing jingles and scoring plays while in elementary school. And by his teens, he was playing piano, composing, and arranging. Eventually, his talents landed him at the prestigious Berklee College of Music, where he studied film scoring. But it was upon graduating that he faced the harsh reality of the music industry. No record label wanted to sign him to an artist deal, so he took whatever gigs he could get, including doing jingles for commercials. However, one of his contemporaries at Berklee would soon offer a way into a different kind of scoring. His friend was working as an assistant for Hans Zimmer, and he suggested that Ramit reach out. Now, as anyone who's ever worked in Hollywood can attest, landing a job as a film composer's assistant is basically like the minor leagues. It's grueling, low pay, long hours, tons of travel. But if you want to break into the business, it's the best way to get your foot in the door. So Ramit packed up and moved to California. For the next few years, he assisted Hans Zimmer on various projects like The Prince of Egypt, The Thin Red Line, and the Pirates franchise. All the while, he continued to write music for video games. And in 2003, that work paid off in a big way when his score for the PC game Star Trek was nominated for a BAFTA Games Award. Yet despite this success, hours were still grueling and the pay was still low. Then one day in the spring of 2006, Ramin got a call. The composer John Barry was looking for someone to assist him on a show called Rome, and since Barry was one of Ramin's heroes, he jumped at the chance. When he arrived, however, he quickly realized something was wrong. There was no orchestra, no full production. John Barry was essentially alone in a small room with a laptop and a MIDI keyboard. In retrospect, Ramin understood this was the legendary composer's way of showing him what real passion looked like. You see, Barry was frustrated. He'd been hired to write the Rome theme, but he couldn't get it to click. So he'd spent weeks locked away in his studio trying to perfect it on his own. Finally, when he played the piece for the executives, they loved it. But they weren't sold on the arrangement. They wanted it to be epic, larger than life. Of course, this was a problem because John Barry wasn't a fan of large ensembles. To him, big scores meant bloated arrangements and weak melodies. He preferred minimalism, something Ramin instinctively understood. So Ramin went to work, transcribing the piece for strings and brass. But after 2 weeks, he still wasn't happy. It felt overwrought, too similar to Barry's other work. He mentioned this to his boss, who understood the problem perfectly. John Barry was a legend, but he was set in his ways and stubborn as hell. No one had ever had the heart to tell him his work didn't translate well to a full orchestra. But Rumman knew he had a golden opportunity. Here was a chance to make a name for himself in Hollywood, so he took a deep breath and told Barry he needed to try something else. The legend was not happy, but he eventually relented. So Rahman went back to his desk and composed a new theme, something that balanced the grandeur of the HBO series with Barry's minimalist sensibilities. When he played it for the higher-ups, they loved it. And that was that. Barry was furious, but Rahman's work became the basis for the show's final season. This wasn't the end, though. Barry was still adamant that he was the one who should get the credit. So when he accepted his Golden Globe for Best Original Score, he gave a speech that made zero mention of the man who really made it happen. Needless to say, their working relationship ended quickly thereafter, and Rahman was back to square one. But he'd proven himself capable of writing something special, and soon enough the phone would ring again. David Benioff and Dan Weiss, the creators of Game of Thrones, were looking for a composer. And after hearing Rahman's work on Rome, they were eager to bring him aboard. We all know how that turned out. And while Rahman has gone on to score dozens of films and TV shows, Game of Thrones will forever be his magnum opus. How fitting, then, that the show's most terrifying moment came from one of its quietest episodes. If you haven't guessed already, we're talking about the infamous Battle of the Bastards. Now, some viewers were understandably confused by the omission of major players like Sansa, Arya, and even Jon Snow. But those who followed the books knew exactly what was coming, and boy did the show deliver. After 5 minutes of brutal action, we finally see a familiar face, but it's not exactly a welcome sight. After getting knocked off his horse, Jon Snow wakes up only to find himself surrounded by Ramsay Bolton's men. And as they close in, we hear the unmistakable sound of a snare drum hitting on every single beat. It's a technique known as a lurch, and it creates an effect of rising tension. It doesn't stop there either. Once Jon is taken prisoner and thrown in a dog cage, the drums return. This time, they're joined by a distorted electric guitar, giving the scene an almost otherworldly feel. Even the use of wind instruments is noteworthy. Instead of horns, which usually signal heroism or triumph, the show uses shakuhachi, an ancient Japanese bamboo flute known for its haunting, melancholic tone. All these elements combine to create an atmosphere of hopelessness, desperation. The viewer feels Jon's fear and helplessness, and we know things are bad when even the music seems to lose faith in him. However, there's one aspect of the score that makes it truly terrifying: the use of silence. Just as the battle rages outside the cage, we hear nothing. Silence is an incredibly powerful storytelling device, especially when you're used to hearing a constant soundtrack. It puts us right in the heads of the characters, experiencing what they're feeling in real time. And what's more terrifying than knowing that you're trapped with no way out? In the case of the Battle of the Bastards, the combination of heavy percussion, distorted guitars, and chilling flutes give way to silence. And in that quiet, we experience Jon's darkest hour. When the drums return, it's a sign of hope. But the real power lies in the moments of stillness. That's the stuff of nightmares. If you thought Rahman's work on Game of Thrones was amazing, you've got to check out our other videos on the incredible people behind the magic of pop culture.